The bold and the beautiful, a storm behind the silk. The tension inside the Forrester estate was razor sharp. When Bridget Forrester emerged from the lab with the final paternity results, every breath in the room caught. She spoke with clinical precision, but her voice trembled under the weight of what it meant. Will is not the father, she announced, laying down the papers like a verdict. The silence that followed was loud, pulsing with disbelief. Donna's gasp echoed. Katie froze. And in a corner, Luna's hands shook. It had all started with one night. A fashion shoot that ran too long. A lingering touch during a shared ride home. And emotions frayed after weeks of unresolved tension. RJ had been there. Supportive. Glowing with the weight of his family legacy but eager to prove he could stand on his own. Luna, still struggling to find her place in the Forrester orbit, had let her guard slip. One night, one mistake. And now, with Bridget's announcement, the consequences had come home. RJ sat stiffly in his chair, the shadows under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. The cameras hadn't stopped since the rumors started. And now with the test results in, it wasn't just a PR nightmare. It was career-ending. Brooke clutched Ridge's arm, her eyes darting from RJ to the faces of the family. Ridge stood tall, but even he couldn't hide the tremor in his jaw. Their son's reputation, his future, was about to implode under the weight of scandal. And worse, they were parents. No press release or brand campaign could fix what had already been broken. Zende stood apart from the others, arms crossed, jaw tight. He'd always been told he was a part of the Forrester family. But now it was clear. He was second choice. Luna had chosen RJ. Or maybe she hadn't chosen at all. Either way, it didn't matter now. His rage was volcanic. Years of effort and ambition rendered invisible by a single night RJ never even meant to have. So that's it? He barked. He gets everything, again? He screws up and still gets to be golden boy? No one answered. No one could. Steffi was already thinking 10 steps ahead. If this exploded further, Forrester Creations would be dragged through the mud. Investors would get spooked. Campaigns could collapse. She'd seen what scandal could do to a brand. Especially one so tightly wound around its founding family. We need to contain this, she told Ridge, pulling him aside. The press can't get wind of a revised paternity claim. We can't afford another scandal, not after the Rome fallout. But the chaos was far from containable. Lee, hearing Bridget's test results, immediately demanded intervention. As a doctor, she was skeptical. The timeline, the behaviors, the emotional volatility, none of it added up. She called for an independent evaluation, both medical and legal. We owe it to the child, she snapped. This isn't just about family drama. There are lives at stake. Bridget, defensive but exhausted, refused to be undermined. I followed protocol. I double-checked the samples. Then triple-checked them, Lee snapped. Because I don't trust anyone who's emotionally involved. Luna, still reeling, wanted nothing more than to disappear. To restart quietly, away from cameras, away from press statements and whispered boardroom meetings. But Eric had other plans. As patriarch, he'd watched too many family implosions to let this one unravel in the dark. He called for a family summit. We settle this now, he said, stern and immovable. We owe it to the child. And to each other. Luna begged for privacy. She didn't want her child to be a pawn in another Forrester power play. But the Forresters never did quiet. They did legacy. The room was full the day of the meeting. Every name that mattered was present. Bridget represented the results. RJ Forrester was the father. Confirmed by the second test. But just as the weight of finality began to settle in, the storm struck again. An anonymous tip had been delivered to Lee's assistant, a printout from the lab system's access logs. It showed that the paternity test results had been edited. Not once, twice, quietly, subtly. The date fields didn't align. The final version, the one that named RJ as the father, had been uploaded late at night, outside of standard operating hours. Only one user account had access privileges to make such edits. The account belonged to someone trusted. Someone inside, a member of the Forrester family. The room exploded. Brooke leapt to her feet, demanding answers. Ridge turned cold, eyes scanning everyone, weighing every loyalty. Zende looked from RJ to Luna, then to Bridget. You said you followed protocol. Did you? Bridget's face flushed. Yes, she said, but her voice lacked force. I did. Then how did this happen? Steffi cut in. Who had a reason to tamper with this? Eyes turned to Zende, then to Lee, even to Donna. But one person remained quiet. One person who hadn't spoken since the start. Hope, RJ's sister, normally the voice of calm reason, had been unusually quiet through the entire fallout. She and Luna had become close in recent months. She'd once said she'd do anything to protect RJ. But was that enough to manipulate a test result? Or was someone higher up orchestrating it all, trying to protect the company name from collapse? Eric slammed his cane against the floor. This ends now. We get a full audit of the lab. We retest. And this time, it goes to a third-party facility. I won't have this family's name dragged through the dirt over a lie. But what was the truth? Anymore? Luna collapsed into a chair, the pressure becoming unbearable. She had told the truth. Hadn't she? That night with RJ had happened. She remembered his touch, the way he held her afterward, the guilt the next morning. But could she trust what she remembered anymore? The pregnancy had been a blur of stress and pressure, and now even science seemed to betray her. RJ, barely holding himself together, turned to his mother. If I'm not the father, tell me, am I still worth anything in this family? Brooke, torn between loyalty and fear, couldn't answer. Steffi took charge again. We go silent to the press. No one says a word until we have verified results. And when we do, whatever they are, we deal with them internally. No leaks. No statements. But secrets don't stay buried in this family. And someone, somewhere, had just rewritten the future of the Forrester legacy with a few keystrokes. Whoever it was, they weren't just protecting a secret. They were rewriting the rules. Because in the world of the bold and the beautiful, the truth isn't just complicated, it's dangerous. And this time, the danger was coming from within. The fallout was only beginning. The bold and the beautiful, shattered threads the moment Bridget Forrester placed the final lab results on the table. The atmosphere inside Forrester Creations went from strained to combustible. Her voice, low and clinical, sliced through the tension like a scalpel. Will is not the father, she said. The silence was thunderous. But before anyone could react, before the waves of consequence could ripple fully outward, Luna took a breath and dropped a name that would ignite an inferno. Zende, she said quietly. Then louder, trembling but clear. Zende was with me that night. The words echoed through the room, hanging in the air like smoke from a grenade. And then came the fallout. RJ's face cracked. Hurt, betrayal, confusion, and disbelief clashed all at once in his eyes. Until that moment, he'd braced himself for the worst, but this was beyond what he imagined. It wasn't just a matter of paternity anymore, it was a personal betrayal. A double blow. Zende, his cousin, his competition, his shadow in the design room and now in his private life. RJ stepped back like he'd been struck, the rage in his chest barely contained. Zende stood frozen. For a second, he looked smug, vindicated. Then the weight of Luna's words, and the silence that followed, wiped the satisfaction off his face. Half pride, half panic flashed across him. He had danced around the edge of scandal before, but now he was in the eye of it. And this time, it involved the Forrester name, a child, and his future. The design floor erupted. Word spread like wildfire. Staff whispered in corners. Interns clutched their phones. And production halted as shockwaves tore through every corridor of Forrester Creations. Carter Walton, legal counsel and the man everyone looked to in chaos, stepped in immediately. If what she's saying is true, he said sternly, we're looking at serious internal liability. Not just scandal, legal exposure, brand damage. The board needs to be briefed. Ridge Forrester moved with practiced control, eyes cold, jaw locked. He turned to Carter. We don't leak. We don't speak. Not a word until we assess. Family first. Brand second. No one outside this building hears a thing. But inside, nothing could be silenced. Trust had imploded. Poppy Nozawa, Luna's mother, barged into the fray with a singular purpose. She demanded order. Demanded Luna protect her future. You marry him, she insisted. Zende is offering. Take it. Cement your dignity. This doesn't need to be ugly. But Luna, no longer the soft-spoken intern shadowing the Forresters, pushed back hard. I'm not property. I don't marry to escape scandal. I want the truth, not a cover. The room split. Some saw Poppy's words as old-fashioned but strategic. Others saw Luna's defiance as reckless but brave. Steffi Forrester, ever the strategist, understood both perspectives but said nothing, already calculating how to shield the company's legacy from this ever-growing explosion. Zende, under pressure and public scrutiny, took a bold step. I'm ready, he declared. To be a father. To marry Luna if that's what it takes. I don't want this child growing up without stability. Some took it as honor. Others, like RJ, saw it as opportunism wrapped in PR. You don't get to rewrite history, RJ snapped. If you cared, you would have told me. You would have told her. And then came the shattering twist. Paris Buckingham entered the room, eyes blazing, holding a flash drive like a loaded weapon. Before anyone throws themselves on a sword, she said, maybe we should all watch this first. What followed was damning. The footage showed the night in question. The after-party. The shadows. The dim lighting. The clinking of glasses. But then came the crucial seconds. Luna, laughing and swaying, was handed a drink. Not by Zende, not directly, but through a chain of guests that started with him. Her reaction to the drink was immediate, too quick, too intense for someone simply tipsy. Paris hit pause. I found the security cam from the guesthouse hallway. She wasn't just drinking. She was out of it. Barely walking straight, and Zende led her upstairs. The silence was suffocating. What started as a story of accidental pregnancy and romantic entanglement had veered into something far darker. Consent, power, intent. The terrain had shifted and no one was safe. Zende paled. I didn't know she was drunk, he said, barely audible. I thought, she didn't say no. She didn't say anything, Paris shot back. That's the point. RJ stepped forward, fists clenched. You used your name, your status, your access. You knew she was vulnerable. You played hero and took advantage of it. Zende tried to speak but his voice faltered. I didn't mean, you meant to win, Carter interrupted. And you might have cost us everything. Now the question wasn't just about paternity or scandal. It was whether a crime had been committed under the roof of Forrester Creations. Lee demanded that the authorities be contacted. Bridget, torn between her medical responsibilities and her family allegiance, said nothing but left the room quietly. Heart pounding. Poppy pulled Luna close, shaken, eyes wide. I'm sorry, she whispered. I thought he was the safe choice. Luna stared ahead, cold and hollow. There was no choice. Ridge, barely holding himself together, slammed his hand on the table. This company was built on integrity. On respect. If any of that still matters, if we still call ourselves Forresters, then we don't bury this. We fix it, even if it burns everything down. The war lines were drawn. On one side, truth, justice, and consequences. On the other, reputation, damage control, and legacy. Eric, silent through most of the chaos, finally spoke. His voice was low, trembling but iron strong. If we protect Zende, we are no better than the men we swore we'd never become. We find the truth. No matter the cost, Forrester Creations was no longer a design house, it was a battleground. And the battle was no longer about who fathered a child. It was about who still had a soul.